What if you could hold history in the palm of your hand? Not just dates and names, but the very objects that once brought laughter and wonder to a child's world 2,000 years ago. Today, we're embarking on a journey that bridges centuries, peering into the daily lives of Roman children through the toys they cherished. These weren't just simple distractions. They were mirrors of society, tools of learning, and echoes of a culture whose influence still resonates today. Imagine the dusty streets of ancient Rome, the bustling marketplaces, and the courtyards where children gathered, not so different from our own neighborhoods, really. Their world was filled with marvels we often overlook, and at the heart of it all were the playthings that shaped their imaginations and prepared them for the world they would inherit. We often think of ancient history as something grand and distant: gladiators, emperors, and epic constructions. But what about the small, intimate moments? The joy of a game, the comfort of a doll, the thrill of a spinning top. These artifacts whisper stories that textbooks seldom tell. In this video, we won't just talk about these treasures, we'll resurrect them. Together, we'll explore how Roman children played, what their toys reveal about their values and dreams, and why something as simple as a carved wooden horse or a set of knucklebones can speak volumes about humanity itself. From humble clay rattles to intricate board games, we'll dive into the incredible diversity of Roman children's toys and even try our hand at recreating a few, bringing them back to life with the same care and curiosity their original makers might have felt. This isn't just a history lesson, it's an invitation to reconnect with the past in a way that's tactile, emotional, and unforgettable. So join me as we step into the sandals of a Roman child, rediscover the magic of play across the ages, and uncover the secrets hidden in these ancient treasures. The journey starts now. Among the most cherished possessions of a Roman child, particularly a young girl, was her doll. But these were far from the simple, static figures we might picture. Crafted with remarkable skill from materials like wood, bone, or terracotta, and for the most affluent families, even ivory, these dolls were sophisticated companions. Many were articulated, designed with movable limbs at the shoulders and hips, joints that were often connected by tiny pins. This ingenious design meant a child could pose her doll, making it sit, stand, or wave its arms, bringing a level of dynamic, imaginative play that feels surprisingly modern. The true magic, however, was in the details. Archaeologists have uncovered these ancient toys dressed in meticulously crafted miniature versions of contemporary Roman clothing, tiny tunics, stolas, and even miniature jewelry. Some dolls were accompanied by entire wardrobes, with changeable outfits that mirrored the latest fashions in Rome. This wasn't merely about adornment, it was a profound form of socialization. Through play, a young girl learned about the fabrics, the styles, and the intricate process of dressing that defined a Roman matron. She was, in essence, practicing for her future role in society, understanding the expectations of womanhood through the hands of her favorite toy. The discovery of these dolls in graves offers a particularly poignant glimpse into the past. It was a common practice to bury a child with their most beloved doll, a final companion for the journey to the afterlife. This act speaks volumes about the emotional weight these objects carried. They were not simple playthings to be discarded. They were confidantes, friends, and a central part of a childhood that, while lived 2 millennia ago, was filled with the same love and attachment we recognize today. This ceremonial offering was a powerful rite of passage. When a girl came of age, often around the time of her wedding, she would formally dedicate her childhood doll to a deity. This act, typically performed at a household shrine dedicated to the Lares, the protective spirits of the home, or at a temple of Venus, the goddess of love and fertility, or Diana, the goddess of the hunt and childbirth, was deeply symbolic. It represented a final farewell to the world of childhood and a wholehearted embrace of her new adult responsibilities as a wife and future mother. The doll itself was a physical manifestation of her youth, and by giving it up, she was publicly acknowledging this profound personal transformation. Archaeologists have found caches of these dolls deliberately placed in religious contexts, confirming the historical writings that describe this tender and significant tradition. Beyond this voluntary offering, there is also the heartbreakingly common discovery of dolls placed in the graves of children. In these somber contexts, the doll was not a symbol of a life beginning, but a comfort for a life ended far too soon. It was believed that this cherished companion would accompany the child's spirit into the afterlife, providing a familiar source of solace in the unknown. Whether given up in a temple or placed in a grave, the doll consistently served as a bridge between worlds, connecting the living and the divine, the earthly realm and the afterlife, or simply a girl's past with her future. The quality of these dolls painted a clear picture of Roman social stratification, even among the young. A child from a wealthy senatorial family might play with an exquisite doll carved from ivory, with finely painted features, real cloth garments edged with gold thread, and perhaps even miniature gold jewelry. Meanwhile, a child from a craftsman's family would likely have a simpler doll, perhaps whittled from wood by a parent, with painted-on clothes and static limbs. And for the poorest children, a doll might be nothing more than a roughly shaped piece of cloth stuffed with straw. This range of craftsmanship shows us that while the emotional significance of the toy was universal, the experience of childhood and the resources available for play were deeply influenced by the stark economic realities of the Roman world. While the doll was a companion for a young girl's journey into adulthood, the very first toy a Roman child would ever encounter was something far simpler, yet equally profound: the rattle. For Roman parents, the sound of a baby's laughter or cooing was just as cherished as it is today, and they understood the power of a simple object to captivate their youngest family members. These ancient rattles were masterclasses in multi-sensory engagement, designed not just to entertain, but to stimulate a child's developing mind. The variety of materials used is a testament to their ubiquity across Roman society. A common rattle might be made from baked clay, formed into a hollow sphere and filled with tiny pebbles or dried peas that would create a soft, shuffling sound when shaken. Others were crafted from bronze, beaten into a delicate container that produced a brighter, more metallic jingle. For families with even fewer means, nature provided the perfect tool: a large, hollowed-out nutshell, carefully cleaned and filled with a few small stones, then sealed shut to become a child's first instrument. The ingenuity of these designs shows that the desire to bring joy to a child transcended social class. But the Romans, with their innate love for art and storytelling, rarely settled for the purely functional. Many of these rattles were sculpted into whimsical forms. Archaeologists have found them shaped like birds, pigs, and other familiar animals, transforming the noisemaker into a miniature piece of sculpture. A baby wouldn't just be grasping a ball. They would be holding a tiny, clattering duck or a cheerful-looking piglet. This added a visual and tactile element to the play, allowing the infant to explore the carved details with their fingers while being delighted by the sounds it made. This combination of sound, shape, and texture was a primitive but effective form of early childhood stimulation. For the elite, like the family of a senator or a wealthy merchant, a child's rattle could be a true status symbol. Excavations have uncovered incredibly ornate rattles made of silver, and in exceptionally rare cases, even ivory. These were often intricately decorated with engravings or inlaid with bits of glass or semi-precious stone. Owning such an object was a clear declaration of wealth and refinement, a statement that even the youngest member of the household was surrounded by luxury. Yet, regardless of the material's value, the core purpose remained the same: to amuse and soothe the child who held it. Beyond their obvious role in development and entertainment, these rattles held a deeper, more superstitious significance in the Roman world. Infant mortality was tragically high, and parents lived in constant fear of malevolent forces or the evil eye harming their vulnerable newborns. The constant percussive noise produced by a rattle was believed to serve a protective function. The sound was thought to frighten away evil spirits that might be lurking, hoping to bring sickness or misfortune to the child. In this way, a simple toy became a potent amulet, a parent's practical tool for safeguarding their most precious gift through both distraction and divine intervention. This widespread distribution tells a fascinating story. The discovery of nearly identical rattle designs in places as far apart as a fort on Hadrian's Wall and a wealthy villa in North Africa points to a shared Roman identity that extended even into the nursery. A child in Roman Britain and a child in Roman Egypt could have been soothed by the very same clattering sound, a small but powerful thread connecting different corners of a vast empire. It underscores a universality of childhood experience that transcends time and geography. Perhaps the most evocative example of these artifacts comes from the city frozen in time, Pompeii. In the ruins of a home, archaeologists uncovered a bronze rattle crafted in the delightful shape of a plump, cheerful pig. The craftsmanship is exquisite, with detailed features like curled ears and a snout. But the true magic happened 2 years later when an archaeologist gently picked it up and gave it a tentative shake. To everyone's astonishment, the faint, whispering sound of tiny stones shifting inside was still perfectly audible. That moment provided an immediate, intimate, and incredibly moving auditory link to a Roman infant who once found comfort in that very same noise. It's one thing to see an object behind glass, but to hear it is to feel the past come alive in a completely different way. When we set out to recreate these rattles, the challenge isn't just in replicating the look, it's in capturing the sound. The material makes all the difference. A terracotta rattle filled with dried lentils produces a soft, muffled shushing sound, almost like gentle rain. A bronze rattle with small clay pellets inside creates a brighter, more metallic chatter. We experiment with different fillings, pebbles, beans, bits of metal, each combination offering a unique acoustic signature. This sonic archaeology allows us to understand what a Roman baby would have actually heard, the specific auditory texture of their playtime. It was a sound that meant comfort, attention, and safety. Beyond their immediate function, the designs themselves were miniature lessons in culture. Rattles were frequently adorned with symbols from mythology, a tiny owl for Minerva, goddess of wisdom, perhaps in the hope it would bless the child with intelligence. Others featured natural motifs like birds or fruit, reflecting a world deeply connected to nature and its bounty. Even this simplest of toys was a subtle introduction to the symbols and stories that define the Roman world, a child's first unconscious exposure to the values and beliefs of their society, all held safely in their tiny, grasping hands. Moving from the gentle rattle of infancy, Roman children soon graduated to toys that required a bit more skill and dexterity. The spinning top was a true empire-wide phenomenon, a simple toy whose universal appeal is something we can all recognize instantly. Found in the dusty corners of courtyards from Syria to Scotland, these were objects of pure physics and pure fun. A skilled child could set their top whirling with a sharp pull of a string wrapped around its spindle, or simply by spinning it deftly between their fingers. The goal was often a simple contest of endurance, a test to see which player's top could dance and gyrate the longest before wobbling to a still and silent stop. But these weren't always just plain pieces of carved wood. Some tops were miniature canvases, their sides carefully inscribed with concentric circles, spirals, or even simple figures. When set into a rapid spin, these static patterns would blur and merge into mesmerizing optical illusions, a swirling vortex of color and shape that must have seemed almost magical. A top decorated with a series of dots could transform into a perfect, solid circle. One painted with alternating bands of color might blend into a single new hue. This was a lesson in perception and physics disguised as a game, a playful demonstration of how motion could alter reality before their very eyes. This fascination with the top's motion wasn't lost on the great thinkers of the ancient world. The philosopher Aristotle himself used the spinning top, or a rhombus as it was sometimes called, to illustrate complex principles of physics and stability. He pondered why a top could stand on its point only when in motion, a question that gets to the very heart of rotational dynamics. Even Plato referenced these whirling toys in his writings. For these philosophers, the humble top was more than a diversion. It was a perfect, accessible model of the cosmos, a stable, self-sustaining system rotating around a central axis. A tiny echo of the celestial spheres they believed governed the universe. Recreating one of these tops is a lesson in ancient craftsmanship and practical physics. The choice of material is crucial. A top carved from a dense wood like oak or olive has a satisfying heft and momentum, but it must be perfectly symmetrical. Any imbalance, any slight asymmetry in its shape, will cause it to shudder and fall over almost immediately. We start with a lathe, much as a Roman woodworker might have, carefully shaping the wood into a perfectly balanced form. Then comes the painstaking process of testing, shaving off a tiny sliver here, adjusting the weight distribution there, until it finds that perfect point of equilibrium. The real magic happens with the first successful spin. When you finally get it right, and the top leaps from your fingers to hum steadily on the floor, there's a profound sense of connection. You're not just watching a piece of wood spin. You're participating in the same exact experiment, witnessing the same satisfying phenomenon that captivated a child in a Roman street and a philosopher in the Athenian agora. The laws of physics haven't changed, and the joy of mastering them hasn't either. It's a timeless victory, a perfect spin that bridges 2,000 years in the blink of an eye. But the simple hand-spun top was only the beginning of Roman spinning innovations. They also enjoyed a more dynamic and interactive version known as the turbo, a whipping top set into motion not by fingers, but by the sharp crack of a lash. This toy consisted of a larger, sturdy wooden top, often with a grooved or notched surface, and a small whip made from a stick with a leather thong. A child would wrap the thong around the top's body, set it on the ground, and then yank the whip away with a practiced flick of the wrist to launch it into a spin. The real engagement came next, as the player would then use the whip to repeatedly strike the sides of the spinning turbo, transferring energy with each hit to keep it whirling furiously and prevent it from slowing down. The skill required was immense. Too gentle a strike did nothing, while too harsh a blow could send the top careening wildly off course. The audible component of this game added another layer of excitement. The rhythmic snap of the lash and the humming buzz of the wood created a symphony of play that was both physically active and deeply satisfying to master. This was a toy that demanded full body coordination and focus, a far cry from the passive observation of a simple spinning top. For children who preferred a pocket-sized challenge, there were also simple spinners fashioned from everyday disc-shaped objects. A common version was made from a reused piece of pottery, a flat stone, or a carved wooden disc. A hole was drilled directly through the center, and a cord was threaded through it. The child would hold each end of the cord, wind the disc by twisting it, and then, by pulling their hands apart and relaxing them in a rhythmic motion, they could keep the disc spinning rapidly on its central axis, humming back and forth between the two lengths of string. This created a mesmerizing, zooming visual effect and a distinctive whirring sound. The simplicity of its construction meant that almost any child, regardless of their family's wealth, could craft one of these spinners from found materials, making it one of the most democratic and accessible toys in the ancient world. Of course, these toys were rarely used in isolation. Roman children, much like kids today, turned their play into competition. A popular game involved using a turbo as a projectile. Players would each spin their tops within a marked circle or a simple dug-out pit in the dirt, the goal being to maneuver their own spinning top to violently collide with and knock an opponent's top out of the designated area. This required not just the ability to launch the top successfully, but also the skilled use of the whip to guide its path and direct its aggressive dance across the ground. It was a test of precision, strategy, and power. Other games were less combative but equally challenging, such as seeing who could keep their turbo spinning the longest with the fewest lashes, or who could execute the most complex series of strikes without sending their top flying off into the crowd. Bringing these games back to life in our recreations is a fascinating process that blends craft with physical experimentation. Constructing an authentic turbo begins with selecting a dense, hard wood that can withstand the repeated impact of the lash without splintering. The shape is critical. It needs a wide, flat base for stability and a tapered, pointed top for that perfect pivot point. The whip slash must be made from a sturdy but supple leather to effectively transfer energy. The first few attempts are always humbling. A poorly aimed lash sends the top skittering away, or an uneven spin causes it to topple immediately. But after practice, a rhythm develops. The satisfying thwack of leather on wood, the immediate response of the top spinning faster, the focused concentration required to keep it centered. It's an incredibly active and engaging form of play. You quickly understand how this game wasn't just fun. It was a genuine workout for hand-eye coordination, timing, and patience, teaching physical discipline through the pure joy of making a piece of wood defy gravity. Beyond the spinning frenzy of the turbo, Roman children also enjoyed games of skill that relied less on speed and more on dexterity and a bit of luck, often using one of the most common and versatile objects in the ancient world, knucklebones. Known to the Romans as astragali, these were the ankle bones of sheep or goats, prized for their unusual and consistent shape. Unlike a typical bone, the astragalus is a blocky, almost dice-like form with 4 distinct, well-defined sides and 2 rounded ends that were impractical for landing upright. This unique geometry made it perfect for games of chance, as it could land in one of 4 stable positions, each with its own assigned value. The games played with these bones were wonderfully varied. In their simplest form, a handful of astragali were used like dice, tossed from a cup or the player's hand, with the score determined by which sides landed face up. The four sides were often given names derived from mythology or geometry, adding a layer of cultural learning to the game. But the most popular and physically challenging game was a direct ancestor of the modern game of jacks. A player would toss a single bone into the air and, before catching it, had to swiftly scoop up a specific number of other bones from the ground. The challenge escalated as the player had to perform this action repeatedly, often catching the tossed bone on the back of the hand rather than in the palm, requiring immense speed, coordination, and a steady nerve. For wealthier children, the humble animal bone could be replaced by far more luxurious versions. Exquisitely crafted replicas were made from semi-precious materials like amber, glass, or polished bronze. For the absolute elite, there were even sets carved from ivory, each piece a miniature sculpture. Some of these luxury sets were intricately engraved with the names of the sides, or with tiny images of gods and goddesses, turning a common playground game into a display of family status and refined taste. However, these ornate versions were the exception. For the vast majority of Roman children, a good knucklebone was simply a well-worn, naturally polished bone found near a butcher's shop or in the fields, its surface smoothed by countless hours of play. The appeal of knucklebones stretched far beyond childhood. Adults were known to be fervent players, often using them for gambling, with large sums of money wagered on a single toss of the bones. They have been found in staggering numbers everywhere from military barracks, where soldiers passed time between duties, to the bustling floors of public baths and the quiet courtyards of wealthy villas. This universal popularity across age, gender, and social class speaks to the simple, enduring charm of the game. It was a great social equalizer, a shared pastime that could connect a legionary, a senator's son, and a merchant's daughter through the common language of play. Recreating the experience of playing with authentic astragali provides a tangible link to this everyday pastime. Handling real sheep ankle bones, you immediately appreciate their perfect size and weight for tossing. They feel substantial in the hand, yet are small enough to easily manipulate. The naturally occurring facets make them bounce and land in unpredictable ways, adding that essential element of chance. Trying the classic jacks game reveals its deceptively high difficulty level. The timing is everything, tossing one bone just high enough to give yourself a split second to gather the others, all while tracking the airborne piece to ensure a clean catch. It's a game that fosters intense concentration and quick reflexes, a skill-building exercise disguised as pure fun. The faint clattering sound of the bones striking each other is the same sound that would have echoed through forums and homes across the empire, a timeless soundtrack to focus, laughter, and friendly competition. The rules governing these games of chance could be wonderfully intricate, transforming a handful of bones into a complex exercise in probability and skill. One of the most common scoring systems, as described in ancient texts, assigned a specific numerical value and a name to each of the four possible sides the bone could land on. The broad, concave side was called the chios and was often worth 3 points. The opposite broad, convex side was the hytanes and was worth 4. The two narrower, flat sides were the pranes, worth 6 points, and the coon, worth 1. A player would toss several bones from their hand or a cup, and their score for that turn was the sum of the values showing. The first to reach a predetermined total would be declared the winner, but the games extended far beyond simple addition. There were variations with names like the Throw of Aphrodite, which was the highest possible roll, likely involving all 4 different values landing face up. Another game, similar to modern poker dice, involved trying to get multiples of the same value. 5 bones all showing the prized pranes would have been a spectacular and winning throw. The sheer variety of these rule sets, passed down through oral tradition and fragmentary written accounts, shows a culture that adored layering complexity onto its play, turning a simple toss into a strategic contest. This was not a frivolous pastime invented by Roman children. It was an activity with a deep and storied history that they inherited. The Greek poet Homer, writing in the 8th century BCE, describes heroes in the Iliad playing with knucklebones to pass the time during the long siege of Troy. The playwright Sophocles even credited the mythological Palames with inventing the game during that same war. By the Roman era, knucklebones were a timeless classic, a piece of living history that connected them to a heroic, legendary past. Playing the game was, in a small way, an act of cultural participation in a tradition that was already centuries old. The use of astragali extended far beyond the playground and into the very serious adult worlds of gambling and fate. Taverns and public squares would have been filled with the clatter of bones as men wagered money on their throws, the stakes adding a sharp edge to the game's inherent chance. More profoundly, these bones were a preferred tool for divination. Their unpredictable fall was seen as a medium for the gods to communicate their will. A seer, or even a common person seeking guidance, would cast the bones and interpret the resulting combination of sides as an omen, answering questions about love, business, or travel. This dual purpose for both childish fun and sacred ritual perfectly illustrates the Roman world, where the divine was deeply interwoven into the fabric of everyday life. To truly understand this experience, we sourced actual sheep astragali, each one a unique, naturally formed dice. Handling them, you immediately feel their organic imperfections. No 2 are exactly alike in weight or precise shape, which adds a layer of unpredictable chaos to every throw that modern, perfectly machined dice simply cannot replicate. We then attempted to play by the documented ancient rules, which quickly becomes a challenging mental exercise. It's one thing to toss the bones, but quite another to rapidly identify each side, recall its value and name, and calculate your score before your opponent takes their turn. The game demands quick thinking and sharp eyes. This humble object, therefore, becomes a powerful symbol of Roman culture. It was a universal plaything that transcended social class, a gambling device that risked fortune, and a sacred instrument that sought to discern the will of the gods. In the clatter of falling knucklebones, we hear the echo of a society that saw no contradiction between earnest prayer and playful chance, where a child's game and a priest's ritual could be performed with the very same object. It represents a complete blending of play, skill, and superstition that was absolutely central to daily life in the ancient world. While the clatter of knucklebones required a steady hand, another popular Roman pastime demanded full-body coordination and a good sense of balance, the simple yet captivating art of hoop rolling. Across the empire, from crowded city streets to the open courtyards of country villas, you would have found children, and sometimes even adults, guiding large hoops at a run, using a curved stick or a metal rod to keep the circular toy upright and on course. This was far more than just a way to pass the time. It was a dynamic physical activity that promoted agility, speed, and precise motor control. The construction of these hoops reveals a great deal about the available materials, and the ingenuity of Roman toymakers. For the most durable and smooth rolling versions, metal was the preferred choice. Artisans would bend strips of bronze or iron into a perfect circle, carefully welding or riveting the ends together to form a seamless band. The weight of a metal hoop gave it excellent momentum, allowing it to roll for a considerable distance with just a few initial pushes. For children from less affluent families, a wooden hoop was a perfectly viable alternative. A flexible branch from a tree like willow or hazel would be bent into a circle and secured with cord or a simple wooden peg, creating a lighter, though less durable, version of the toy. The true flair, however, came from the decorations. To make the game even more engaging, many hoops were outfitted with small bells or loosely attached metal rings that would jingle and clatter loudly as the hoop sped along. This added an exciting auditory element to the visual spectacle, turning a solitary run into a noisy, celebratory event. The sound also served a practical purpose, alerting people in busy streets to the approaching projectile so they could step aside. Some artistic depictions even show hoops with multiple smaller rings attached to the main circle, creating a complex, whirring soundscape of metal on metal that must have been thrilling to hear. The guiding stick was just as important as the hoop itself. These weren't simple straight rods. They were often purpose-made, with a curved or hooked end designed to cradle the hoop's surface and provide better control. A child would use this tool not just to push the hoop forward, but to steer it, slow it down, or even perform tricks. The material varied widely: a basic stick carved from any available wood, a more refined version with a polished handle, or, for a wealthy child, a guide made from a slender rod of bronze with an elegantly curved tip. Mastering the subtle pressure required to keep the hoop upright without knocking it over was a skill that took considerable practice. Recreating this experience is a fascinating exercise in physics and material science. We started by forging a simple iron hoop, heating a metal strip until it was pliable, and then carefully bending it around a cylindrical form. The challenge is achieving a perfectly round shape. Any flat spots or imperfections cause the hoop to wobble and veer off course almost immediately. For the guiding stick, we experimented with different designs. A simple wooden stick with a natural hook at one end offers good control but can wear down quickly from the friction. A bronze rod, while heavier, provides a smoother, more durable surface that glides effortlessly against the metal hoop, producing a distinctive metallic hiss as it rolls. The moment of truth comes when you give the hoop its first push. A well-made metal hoop has a satisfying heft and a graceful, almost silent roll when it's perfectly balanced. Adding a few small bronze bells transforms the experience entirely. With each revolution, the hoop announces its presence with a cheerful, rhythmic jingling. The skill required is immediately apparent. It takes a gentle but firm touch to guide the hoop in a straight line, and trying to turn a corner without losing momentum or toppling the entire assembly is a deceptively difficult maneuver. You quickly gain an appreciation for the Roman children who could expertly navigate these spinning wheels through crowded and uneven streets, their laughter mingling with the sound of clattering metal, a vibrant reminder that the pure joy of motion is truly timeless. The vibrant world of Roman hoop rolling is beautifully preserved for us in the colorful mosaics and frescoes that adorn their homes. In Pompeii, one particularly charming fresco depicts two young boys completely absorbed in their game. One is captured mid-run, his guiding stick expertly pressed against the large hoop, his body leaning into the motion. The other boy looks on, perhaps waiting for his turn or cheering his friend's skill. This frozen moment, preserved by volcanic ash, is so immediate and relatable it feels as though it could have happened yesterday. These artworks weren't just decoration. They were snapshots of daily life, celebrating the universal energy and joy of childhood, a theme that resonated with wealthy patrons enough to immortalize it on their walls. This popularity wasn't confined to visual art. It also echoed through Roman literature. The poet Martial, known for his sharp and observant epigrams, mentions hoop rolling in one of his poems. He writes with a touch of wry humor about the distinct, clattering noise of a metal hoop being guided down a city street, a sound so common it was part of the urban soundscape. His casual reference is telling. It indicates that the sight of children, and likely adults, playing with hoops was a familiar, everyday occurrence in Rome. It was an activity so woven into the fabric of society that it could be used as a point of reference for his readers, who would instantly recognize the scene he was describing. This cross-medium presence, from grand art to popular poetry, confirms that hoop rolling was a pastime enjoyed across social strata. When we set out to recreate these toys today, the process begins with a deep respect for historical techniques. Forging an authentic metal hoop involves heating a strip of iron or bronze in a forge until it glows a brilliant orange, then carefully bending it around a cylindrical mandrel, using hammers and careful pressure to achieve that perfect, seamless circle. The goal is a flawless ring that, when set in motion, rolls with a quiet, steady hum, its path true and straight. Any slight imperfection, a small flat spot or an uneven weld, immediately reveals itself as a wobble or a sudden veer to the left or right. It's a testament to the skill of Roman metalworkers that so many of these hoops have been found in near-perfect condition. The real magic, however, happens when we take these recreated hoops out for a test run. You quickly learn that it's not merely about running fast. The skill lies in the subtle, constant pressure applied by the guiding stick. Too much force and you knock the hoop over, sending it clattering to the ground. Too little and it loses momentum, wobbles, and falls. The sweet spot is a gentle, consistent push that keeps the hoop spinning upright. Then come the tricks attempting to steer it around obstacles, through a slalom course of stones, or even trying to jump over a small ditch without breaking its rhythm. These challenges would have been the natural evolution of the game for any competitive child, a way to show off hard-won expertise to their friends. This simple toy, in its elegant design, becomes a powerful symbol of a timeless experience. The fundamental joy of setting something in motion and guiding its path, the thrill of speed, the focus required to maintain balance. These are sensations that every child, from ancient Rome to the modern day, instinctively understands. While a Roman child might have guided a bronze hoop past the columns of a forum, a child today might steer a plastic hula hoop down a suburban sidewalk. The materials have changed, but the laughter, the concentration, and the pure, uncomplicated delight of the game remain utterly the same. It's a direct, physical connection across centuries, a reminder that some pleasures are truly eternal. No Roman playground, whether a grand villa's courtyard or a humble city alley, would have been complete without the lively, bouncing presence of balls. These were among the most versatile and widely used toys, offering a spectrum of games that ranged from simple, solitary bouncing to complex, fast-paced team sports. The craftsmanship of these balls is a fascinating study in ancient ingenuity, as Romans utilized a wide array of available materials to create objects for play. The most common type was the pila, a general term for a ball often crafted from strips of leather stitched tightly together and stuffed with a variety of materials to achieve different weights and bounces. For a softer, lighter ball, the stuffing might be feathers, wool, or even human hair clippings, which were often collected by barbers for this very purpose. For a heavier, more solid ball used in more vigorous games, the leather casing might be packed with cloth scraps or sand. But one of the most remarkable innovations was the follies, a larger, lighter ball that was the ancient ancestor of the modern soccer ball or volleyball. This was made from an inflated pig's bladder, which was then often encased in a protective net of leather thongs to help it hold its spherical shape and prevent it from popping too easily. The concept of a ball filled with air was a stroke of genius, creating a toy that was bouncy, responsive, and lively in a way that a stuffed leather sack could never be. The sound of a follies being struck would have been a distinct, hollow thump, a familiar noise in Roman exercise grounds and public parks. The games played with these balls were wonderfully diverse and often surprisingly sophisticated. At the most basic level, children would have played simple games of catch or games, where the goal was to bounce the ball as many times as possible without dropping it. But the Romans also had organized sports with specific rules. One of the most popular was called trigon. This fast-paced game involved 3 players standing at the points of a triangle, throwing not one, but multiple balls between them at a rapid, often simultaneous pace. A player would have a ball in each hand, needing to catch one incoming ball while simultaneously throwing another to a different player. This required immense concentration, quick reflexes, and excellent hand-eye coordination. Other games involved kicking the larger follies, keeping it in the air using only the feet, or playing a form of handball where the objective was to throw the ball over a line or past an opponent. The balls themselves could be objects of beauty, while a child's makeshift ball might be a simple, roughly stitched sphere. More refined versions intended for wealthy adults or for formal games were often works of art. Leather panels were carefully cut and sewn with intricate patterns, and some were even dyed in vibrant colors. The size of the ball was directly tied to its purpose. Small, dense balls were for precision throwing games, medium-sized ones for catching and juggling, and the large follies for kicking and volleying. This specialization shows a culture that had thoroughly considered the physics and purpose of its playthings. Our process of recreating these balls is a hands-on lesson in historical material science. We began by sourcing a fresh pig bladder, cleaning and curing it, and then the delicate work of inflating it begins. The bladder is tied securely at the opening, and the resulting shape is never a perfect sphere, but a lopsided, organic form. We then carefully stitch a custom-fitted net of leather cords around it, which not only protects it, but also helps to round out its shape. The resulting follies is remarkably light and has a wonderfully unpredictable, lively bounce that is completely different from the dead weight of a modern medicine ball or the high rebound of a rubber ball. Sewing a stuffed leather pila presents a different set of challenges. Cutting the leather panels into the correct shapes to form a sphere is a geometric puzzle, and the stitching must be incredibly tight and strong to prevent the stuffing from leaking out under pressure. We experimented with different stuffings. Goose feathers create a ball that is almost too light, floating in the air, while wool scraps give it a satisfying heft. Finally, we had to test them in play. Attempting a game of trigon with 3 hand-stitched leather balls is a chaotic and hilarious exercise that quickly reveals the astonishing skill level of the Romans. Keeping track of the throws and catches in a 3-way exchange requires a level of focus that is both mentally and physically taxing, turning a simple game into a genuine athletic and strategic challenge. The soft thud of the leather ball landing in your palm is a direct tactile link to the coordinated, rhythmic play that once filled the open spaces of the ancient world. Among these ball games, one stood out for its sheer intensity and popularity, a sport known as harpastum. This was not a gentle pastime. It was a rough, fast-paced, and strategically complex team game that bore a striking resemblance to modern rugby or perhaps a form of no-holds-barred keep-away. Derived from the Greek game harpaston, meaning to snatch away, the core objective was for one team to gain control of a small, hard ball and somehow keep it away from the opposing side, who were permitted to use virtually any means necessary to seize it back. The field was divided, and players would pass the ball between teammates while the opposition tackled, blocked, and wrestled them to gain possession. Ancient descriptions and artistic depictions show players covered in dust and mud, grappling fiercely, a clear indication that this was a full-contact sport that prized strength, agility, and sheer determination. The social context of harpastum is particularly fascinating because it was beloved by two seemingly very different groups: professional soldiers and young children. For legionaries stationed at remote forts like those along Hadrian's Wall, harpastum was a preferred form of physical training. It was far more engaging than simple drills. It built teamwork, strategic thinking, endurance, and combat-ready fitness in a package that was actually enjoyable. The constant, chaotic motion and the focus on seizing and retaining control of a small object mirrored the chaos of battle in a controlled, playful environment. Meanwhile, in the towns and villages of the empire, children would have played their own scaled-down versions of the same game, emulating the soldiers they saw and channeling their boundless energy into these mock battles. This shared passion across age and profession highlights how deeply this particular game was embedded in the Roman spirit of competition and physical vigor. The balls used for these varied games were as diverse as the activities themselves, and their qualities served as a subtle but clear marker of social standing. A child from an affluent family might play with a beautifully crafted pila made from finely tanned leather, exquisitely stitched and stuffed with soft, clean goose feathers. A soldier might use a more durable, sand-filled version that could withstand the brutal conditions of the training field. For the poorest children, a ball could be nothing more than a rag tightly wound and tied with string, or a lump of cork shaped into a crude sphere. The difference in materials directly influenced the game's experience. A feather-stuffed ball was soft and pleasant to catch, while a sand-filled one could deliver a stinging impact, and a rag ball would have almost no bounce at all. The toy itself, therefore, was a miniature reflection of the vast economic disparities within Roman society. To truly resurrect the experience of harpastum, our project required a two-part process. First, the physical recreation of the correct ball, and second, the much more challenging task of reconstructing the rules from fragmentary ancient sources. Writers like the physician Galen and the poet Martial mention the game, but they assume their readers already know how to play, so they leave out the precise details. Athenaeus provides a few more clues, describing it as a game of fierce exertion and skill. By piecing these literary fragments together with artistic evidence, such as a famous mosaic from a Roman villa that shows players in mid-action, we can make educated guesses about the field layout, team sizes, and scoring. We then took our recreated sand-filled leather ball, dense, hard, and about the size of a modern softball, and gathered a group to test our theories. The immediate discovery was the sheer physicality of the game. The small size of the ball makes it easy to conceal and difficult to snatch, leading to close quarters grappling. The weight of it means a thrown pass has a serious momentum, and catching it wrong is genuinely painful. Within minutes, our modern version of a harpastum match descended into a joyful but exhausting chaos of diving tackles, strategic passes, and triumphant shouts. This hands-on experimentation is the only way to understand the game's true nature. You can't just read about it. You have to feel the strain in your muscles and the dust in your mouth to appreciate why Roman soldiers considered it the perfect training exercise and why children adored its thrilling, unruly energy. It was more than a game. It was a ritual of physical and social bonding, a loud, sweaty, and utterly authentic expression of Roman life. But the world of Roman play wasn't just about games of skill and chance. It was also a world of miniature dramas, where children reenacted the daily life and grand spectacles they saw around them. Among the most cherished of these imaginative toys were small, detailed models of animals and chariots. Crafted from terracotta, wood, or bronze, these weren't mere trinkets. They were pocket-sized portals into the adult world. A child could hold a tiny, perfectly formed horse in their hand, its mane and harness carefully etched by the artisan, and in their mind, they were a wealthy landowner surveying their stable, a soldier preparing his mount, or a merchant loading a caravan. The range of animals was a veritable menagerie: sturdy oxen for the farm, loyal dogs for the hunt, and even exotic birds, reflecting the Roman fascination with creatures from distant parts of their empire. The pinnacle of this miniature craftsmanship, however, was the toy chariot. These were not simple blocks on wheels. Many were astonishingly detailed replicas of the racing chariots that thrilled crowds at the Circus Maximus. Archaeologists have unearthed tiny terracotta chariots, complete with spoked wheels that actually turn on a working axle, and a small platform where a minuscule figurine of a driver or auriga would have stood. These driver figures are often missing, lost to time, but their presence is implied by the design. For a Roman boy pulling this elaborate toy along the mosaic floor of his home, the sound of its wooden wheels clattering faintly, he could imagine the roar of 250,000 people, the thundering hooves of the teams, and the glory of a victorious lap. He was not just playing. He was rehearsing for his future role as a spectator and patron of Rome's most popular sport. The process of recreating one of these chariots is a meticulous exercise in historical detective work and artisanal skill. We start with the archaeological evidence fragments of terracotta wheels found in childhood graves, or a rare, nearly complete chariot from a museum collection. Using these as our guide, we sculpt the chariot's body or carpentum from clay. The shape is crucial. It must be lightweight yet sturdy, with a curved front and low sides, exactly like the full-scale versions depicted in mosaics. The most challenging part is crafting the wheels. Each one needs a central hub and delicate spokes, which are individually shaped and attached to a thin, rounded rim. Firing the clay at the correct temperature is critical. Too hot, and the delicate spokes warp or crack. Too cool, and the piece remains fragile. Once the basic form is fired, the real artistry begins: painting. Using mineral pigments mixed with a wax or egg-based binder, we recreate the vibrant colors that would have made these toys so eye-catching. Roman chariot factions were famously associated with specific colors: the reds, the whites, the blues, and the greens. A child might proudly own a chariot painted in the livery of his family's favorite team, the green pigment perhaps made from crushed malachite, the details picked out in red ochre. The tiny driver, if we sculpt one, would be painted with a tunic in the same colors, his face a simple daub of flesh-toned paint. The final result is a shockingly sophisticated object, a toy that is also a precise scale model, a piece of sporting memorabilia from 20 years ago. Watching a child today play with a recreated Roman chariot reveals the timeless nature of this kind of imaginative play. The child doesn't need instructions. They intuitively grasp the toy's purpose. They pull it along, making whooshing sounds with their mouth, imagining the speed and the competition. They might set up a small obstacle course of stones as their personal racetrack. This simple act of pulling a wheeled toy is a universal childhood experience, but in the Roman context, it was layered with specific cultural meaning. It was a way of internalizing the social hierarchies of the adult world, from the importance of agriculture and animal husbandry to the shared civic passion for the chariot races. In the quiet concentration of a child guiding their miniature chariot across the floor, we see the future citizens of Rome learning to navigate their world, one small, imaginative journey at a time. These miniature menageries and chariots were far more than simple amusements. They were a child's first introduction to a complex world of symbolism and power. A small clay lion wasn't just a wild beast. It was a representation of Hercules' strength and a symbol of Roman military might. An eagle, whether perched on a tiny stand or clutched in a child's hand, was a direct reference to the supreme symbol of Jupiter and the legions that carried his standard into battle. Even a humble ox pulling a cart was a nod to the agricultural foundation of Roman society and the virtues of hard labor. Through these toys, children were subtly immersed in the iconography of their culture, learning to associate certain animals with specific gods, values, and stories long before they could read the myths themselves. This connection to the broader adult world was perhaps most vividly expressed through the toy chariot. The roar of the crowd at the Circus Maximus was the soundtrack of Rome and the racing factions. The blues, the greens, the reds, and the whites commanded fanatical loyalty. A finely crafted toy chariot, painted in the specific colors of a family's favored team, was a way to bring that colossal, public spectacle into the private home. A child racing their miniature version across the floor was participating in the civic passion of the day, acting out the triumphs of famous drivers like Scorpus or Diocles, and solidifying a lifelong allegiance to their faction. This play was a powerful form of socialization, forging a deep emotional bond between the child and the most popular entertainment empire had to offer. The quality of these objects paints a clear picture of Roman consumer culture and its disparities. At one end of the spectrum, a local potter might produce simple, solid cast clay animals and basic wheeled carts by the dozen, selling them for a few small coins at a market stall. These were the toys of the common child, charming in their simplicity but lacking fine detail. At the other extreme, specialist workshops employed highly skilled artisans to create true masterpieces in miniature. Using the lost wax method, they would cast incredibly detailed bronze chariots with wire-thin reins and delicate spoked wheels that spun on a properly fitted axle. The horses were often sculpted with muscles taut and manes flying, capturing a moment of dynamic speed. For the wealthiest families, there were even toys with moving parts. A pull string might cause a figure to raise its arms or a chariot's wheels to turn a hidden mechanism that made a driver's whip appear to strike. Our process of recreating a high-quality bronze chariot is a demanding test of patience and skill that gives us immense respect for Roman metalworkers. It begins with sculpting the chariot and its team of horses in beeswax, capturing every minute detail from the horses' harnesses to the texture of the wooden chariot body. This wax model is then encased in a clay mold and fired in a kiln, which melts away the wax, hence lost wax casting, leaving a perfect hollow impression. Molten bronze is carefully poured into this cavity, and once cooled, the clay mold is broken away to reveal the raw metal casting. This is where the most delicate work begins, using fine files and abrasives to remove any imperfections, polishing the bronze to a shine, and often adding inlays of silver or copper to highlight details like harness decorations or the driver's helmet. The final result is a breathtaking object that feels less like a child's toy and more like a precious work of art, a testament to a society that valued beauty and craftsmanship even in the objects of play. Through these recreations, we gain a profound appreciation for the dual purpose of Roman toys. They were designed not only to entertain but to quietly educate, weaving the threads of mythology, social structure, and civic pride into the fabric of a child's imagination. A boy steering his bronze chariot was practicing fine motor control, but he was also learning the names of famous racehorses and the colors of his father's favorite team. A girl arranging her clay farm animals was engaging in imaginative storytelling, but she was also internalizing the importance of the land and the animals that sustained Roman life. This seamless blend of education and entertainment was a cornerstone of Roman upbringing, preparing children for their future roles with a lightness of touch that made the lessons feel like nothing more than pure, delightful play. While the clatter of dice and the rush of physical games filled the air, Romans also cherished quieter, more cerebral forms of play that required deep concentration and strategic foresight. Board games were a staple of Roman domestic life, enjoyed by everyone from young children learning their numbers to seasoned senators testing their wits against rivals. The most widespread of these was a game of military strategy known as la trunculi, which translates to the game of little soldiers or brigands. Played on a grid, likely of 8 by 8 or 12 by 8 squares, the objective was to strategically maneuver your pieces to capture your opponents by trapping them between two of your own. The pieces themselves, called calculi or latrons, were often simple, identical stones or glass counters distinguished only by color, placing the entire emphasis of the game on pure tactical skill rather than the luck of a dice roll. This made it a favorite of soldiers and intellectuals alike, a pastime that was both a relaxing diversion and a rigorous mental workout, honing the strategic mind so valued in Roman culture. Another immensely popular game was duodecim scripta, or 12 lines. This game bore a striking resemblance to modern backgammon, played on a long board marked by 3 rows of 12 letters, words, or symbols, hence its name. Players would throw 3 dice to determine how far they could move their 15 pieces around the board, with the ultimate goal of being the first to bear all their pieces off. The twist and the source of the game's excitement came from the ability to land on an opponent's solitary piece, sending it back to the start and forcing them to begin their journey all over again. This combination of chance and strategy created a dynamic, often suspenseful experience where a few lucky dice rolls could completely reverse a player's fortune. Gambling on the outcome of duodecim scripta was common, adding a tangible thrill to every move. For those who preferred to trust entirely to fortune, there were simple dice games using tesserae, standard 6-sided cubes made from bone, ivory, or clay. While we lack detailed rules for many of these games, it's clear they were a popular, quick form of entertainment. The Romans were not above a bit of mischief in their play, and loaded dice have been found by archaeologists, some weighted with lead, others carefully shaved to favor certain numbers, a cheeky testament to the timeless desire to bend luck in one's favor. The boards for these games were as varied as Roman society itself. In public spaces like forum pavements, town squares, or the courtyards of bathhouses, you can still see latrunculi and duodecim scripta grids meticulously carved into stone benches and steps, turning the city itself into a giant playground. At home, a wealthy family might own an elaborate wooden board inlaid with different colored woods or even precious materials, with depressions to hold finely carved pieces of amber, glass, or polished stone. A traveling merchant or a common soldier, however, might simply scratch a grid into a piece of soft wood or a broken potsherd and use pebbles or bits of pottery as their pieces. This accessibility meant that board games truly were a universal pastime, cutting across the rigid class lines that defined so much of Roman life. Recreating these games today is a fascinating exercise in historical puzzle solving. The rules for latrunculi were never fully written down. They are pieced together from passing references in the works of writers like Ovid and Varro, and from the study of surviving boards. We know the goal was capture, but the precise starting positions and any special rules are a subject of debate among historians. This means our recreations involve a degree of educated guesswork. We craft a board based on archaeological finds, often from military sites like Hadrian's Wall, where bored legionaries carved grids into stone, and then test different rule sets to see which creates the most balanced and engaging game. The strategic depth that emerges is remarkable, a complex dance of attack and defense that feels every bit as challenging as chess. Building a duodecim scripta board is a different challenge, focusing on artistry and material. We use plans based on exquisite examples preserved in museums, like a beautiful wooden board found in Egypt. The playing surface is divided into its 3 characteristic rows, and we often adorn the spaces with Latin phrases or symbols as was common, turning each game into a small lesson in language and culture. The pieces are crafted to have a satisfying weight in the hand, and the dice are made from bone, sanded smooth, and marked with the distinctive Roman numeral dots. The first time you roll these ancient-style dice and move your piece, the connection to the past is immediate. You are participating in the same tense calculation, the same weighing of risk versus reward that occupied a Roman citizen 200 years ago. It's a powerful reminder that the desire to outthink an opponent, whether through sheer strategy or a lucky throw, is a fundamental and enduring part of the human experience. The strategic depth of a game like latrunculi becomes apparent the moment you attempt to play it. While the basic objective of capturing an opponent's piece by flanking it with 2 of your own seems simple, the emergent complexity is astonishing. Historians believe each player started with a set of pieces, possibly 16 or more, arranged on opposite sides of the board. The true challenge lay in forming and breaking formations, creating unbreakable lines of defense, and setting clever traps that your opponent wouldn't see until it was too late. This wasn't a game of chance. It was a pure test of foresight and tactical acumen, a miniature battle of wits that mirrored the military drills of the legions and the political maneuvering of the forum. The Roman author Ovid even offered playful advice in his poem Ars Amatoria, suggesting that a man could impress a sophisticated woman by skillfully engaging her in a game of latrunculi, showcasing his intellect rather than just his wealth. This tells us the game was associated with a cultured, sharp mind, a valued social skill in polite company. This cultural significance is further illustrated by the game's presence in art and literature. A striking mosaic from a Roman villa, now in the Vatican museums, depicts two players hunched over a latrunculi board, their faces etched with concentration as they contemplate their next move. They are not boys, but grown men, fully absorbed in their cerebral contest. In literature beyond Ovid, the agricultural writer Varro mentions the game in passing, using its terminology as a familiar point of reference for his readers. Its depiction across these mediums confirms that board games were a normalized part of daily life, a common thread connecting the soldier in his barracks, the senator in his villa, and the philosopher in the agora. They provided a structured space for social interaction that was both intellectually stimulating and deeply ingrained in the fabric of Roman society. Yet, the world of Roman gaming had another, more risque side, intimately tied to the thrill of gambling. While Latrunculi was a quiet battle of strategy, a game like Duodecim Scripta, with its reliance on dice rolls, was a prime vehicle for wagering. Gambling with dice was technically illegal in Rome outside of the festival of Saturnalia, but this law was famously and widely ignored. Taverns and street corners were often filled with the clatter of dice and the heated arguments they provoked. The Roman passion for betting was so intense that we have numerous surviving examples of loaded dice, cleverly crafted to cheat unsuspecting opponents. Some were weighted with a tiny plug of lead on one side, while others were subtly shaved down to make certain numbers more likely to land face up. This blatant dishonesty reveals a layer of Roman life that was opportunistic, cunning, and fiercely competitive. A world where a quick game could mean the difference between a small profit and a significant loss. For others, however, these games were simply a form of pure, unadulterated recreation. The countless game boards scratched in the steps of public buildings and the courtyards of bath complexes speak to their role as a casual social activity. These were impromptu playing fields, carved by generations of ordinary citizens killing time while waiting for business, meeting friends, or simply enjoying a moment of leisure. A simple grid scratched into stone, accompanied by a pouch of common pebbles or pottery shards for pieces, was all that was needed. This accessibility meant that the cognitive benefits of these games, the development of logical reasoning, strategic planning, and patience were available to a vast swath of the population, not just the elite. Playing fostered a sense of community, a shared experience that could bridge social divides, if only for the duration of a game. Our journey to resurrect these games is an exercise in both historical empathy and intellectual challenge. Without a complete rulebook, we have had to become detectives, cross-referencing fragmentary texts with archaeological evidence, and then testing our theories through endless trial and error. Crafting a latrunculi set based on finds from military sites, we experiment with different board sizes and piece counts, playing round after round to see which configurations create the most balanced and engaging experience. The game that emerges is profoundly strategic, often leading to long, tense stalemates that require a player to sacrifice pieces to gain a positional advantage. Playing Duodecim Scripta with period-accurate bone dice is a lesson in embracing fortune's whims, where a single unlucky roll can undo 20 minutes of careful planning. This hands-on engagement doesn't just teach us the rules, it connects us to the intellectual rhythm of the Roman mind, to the pleasure they found in a well-laid plan and the shared groan at an unfortunate throw of the dice. Through these recreated games, we don't just observe history, we sit across the board from it, engaging in the same timeless human pursuits of strategy, chance, and connection. Lifting our gaze from the boards and balls of the ground, we find a Roman toy that truly reached for the skies. While the evidence is more fragmentary, it strongly suggests that Roman children knew the simple joy of flying a kite. In a society with such advanced engineering in siege weapons and sailing, the basic principles of aerodynamics were certainly understood, and it stands to reason that this knowledge would be applied to play. These early kites were likely crafted from lightweight materials like parchment or thin linen cloth, carefully stretched over a delicate wooden frame made from flexible reeds or finely shaved wood. The goal was to create a structure that was incredibly light yet sturdy enough to catch the breeze, a testament to the everyday ingenuity of Roman toymakers. The purpose of these flying objects may have extended far beyond a child's amusement. Some historians theorize that kites, with their ability to soar high above the landscape, could have been used for simple signaling, perhaps by soldiers in remote outposts to communicate over modest distances. There is also the possibility of a religious or ceremonial function, where an object sent skyward could be seen as an offering or a message to the gods, a physical representation of a prayer ascending to the heavens. This multifaceted use would mirror the Roman tendency to blend the practical and the spiritual in their daily tools. However, for the child holding the string, the primary purpose was almost certainly the pure, unadulterated wonder of making something dance on the wind, a feeling that is utterly timeless and universal. Recreating a plausible Roman kite is an exercise in historical deduction and aerodynamic experimentation. With no complete kites surviving the centuries, we rely on clues, references in texts to flying objects, the known materials at their disposal, and a solid understanding of basic physics. We start with a frame of river reeds, chosen for their natural lightness and flexibility, tying them together with fine linen thread to form a simple diamond or rectangular shape. For the sail, we use parchment, soaking and stretching it over the frame. The choice of material is crucial. Modern paper is too heavy and rigid, but thin, untanned animal skin parchment, while delicate, has the perfect combination of lightness and strength when prepared correctly. The final and most critical component is the bridle, the arrangement of strings that connects the kite to the main line. Finding the correct balance point is everything. Too high and the kite will loop and dive uncontrollably. Too low and it will refuse to lift off at all. This is where the real craft lies, a process of tiny adjustments learned through trial and error, a skill undoubtedly passed from parent to child in the ancient world. The first successful launch is a moment of pure triumph. There's a gentle tug on the linen string, a faint rustle of the parchment sail, and then the kite climbs, carving slow, graceful arcs against the blue sky. The perspective it offers is transformative. You are suddenly seeing the world from a new angle, connected to a fragile, man-made object defying gravity through nothing but clever design and the invisible force of the wind. This experience connects us directly to that Roman child in a field outside the city walls. They would have felt that same tug on the string, heard that same soft rustling overhead, and looked up with the same wide-eyed amazement. It is a quiet, personal kind of magic, far removed from the noisy competitions of the playground or the strategic intensity of the board game. It is a solitary conversation with the elements, a simple testament to humanity's enduring desire to reach upwards, to play with the forces of nature, and to feel a sense of exhilaration as something we created with our own hands takes flight, however briefly, into the boundless air. The challenge of pinpointing the exact design of a Roman kite lies in the nature of the evidence itself. While no complete kite has survived, we find compelling clues scattered across the historical record. Some scholars point to texts that describe flying automata or wind-borne objects used in religious ceremonies. There are also artistic depictions, like a famous gemstone carving that appears to show a winged figure holding what might be lines to a kite-like object. These fragments suggest the concept of a tethered flying object was not entirely foreign to the Roman world. Given their mastery of canvas for sails and their understanding of wind power, it is a logical and tantalizing leap to imagine them applying this knowledge to create a toy for a child. Our recreation process, therefore, becomes a fascinating blend of historical detective work and hands-on engineering. We start with materials we know were readily available: a flexible frame of willow or reed, chosen for its natural strength and lightness. For the sail, we reject modern paper, which is too heavy, and instead turn to parchment. This treated animal skin, when carefully scraped thin, possesses a remarkable combination of durability and minimal weight, perfectly suited to catch a gentle breeze. The binding agent is another key detail. We use animal glue, made by boiling down connective tissues, which would have been a common adhesive in any Roman workshop. Assembling the kite is a delicate operation. The reed frame must be tied with fine linen thread at precisely the right tension. Too tight and it risks snapping, too loose and the structure will be unstable. The parchment is then meticulously glued to the frame, stretched taut to form a smooth aerodynamic surface. The final, most critical step is attaching the bridle, the arrangement of strings that connects the kite to the main line. Finding the perfect balance point is an exercise in patience and intuition, a skill undoubtedly passed down through generations. A bridle tied too far forward will cause the kite to loop and dive uncontrollably. Set too far back, it will stubbornly refuse to lift off at all. The true test of our hypothesis comes not in the workshop, but in the field. We take our recreated kite to open areas similar to those that would have surrounded Roman towns, seeking the same kind of steady, reliable breezes that sweep across the Italian peninsula. The first launch is always a moment of held breath. There's a gentle tug on the linen string, a faint, crinkling rustle from the parchment sail, and then triumph. The kite climbs, carving slow, graceful arcs against the sky. This is not the aggressive flight of a modern nylon kite, but a softer, more delicate dance, a quiet conversation with the wind. This exploration into flight underscores a profound truth about Roman ingenuity. It reveals a culture that consistently sought to harness the natural world, not just for grand engineering projects or military conquest, but for pure, simple delight. The desire to send a constructed object soaring into the heavens speaks to a universal human yearning to interact with the elements, to play with the forces of nature, and to experience the exhilarating feeling of lifting something we have made with our own hands into the boundless air. For a Roman child holding that string, the wonder would have been no less magical than it is for us today, a timeless connection across centuries, soaring on the same wind. No Roman boy's childhood would have been complete without the heft of a wooden sword in his hand or the weight of a miniature shield on his arm. In a society where military service was not just a duty but a path to honor and prestige, these toys were far more than simple playthings. They were the essential tools of socialization, molding future citizens from their earliest years. A young boy pretending to be a heroic legionary defending the frontiers, or a mythic warrior like Aeneas, was not merely engaging in fantasy. He was actively rehearsing for his anticipated role in the adult world, internalizing the values of courage, discipline, and loyalty that were the bedrock of Roman identity. The craftsmanship of these toys could be remarkably detailed, offering a clear window into the family's social standing. For the vast majority of boys, a toy sword or gladiolus was a simple object whittled from a single piece of wood, perhaps by a father or an older brother, its blade and crossguard roughly shaped with a knife. Their shield might be a circle of wood with a central boss marked by a painted dot or a simple leather strap nailed to the back for a grip. Yet for the sons of the elite, toy weapons could be exquisite miniatures of the real thing. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny swords with detailed hilts, shields made from thin sheets of bronze embossed with intricate designs, and even miniature plumed helmets crafted from leather or metal. These were not just toys, they were status symbols, proclaiming the family's wealth and the child's destined place among the leaders of Rome's military and political future. The cultural weight of these objects is powerfully illustrated by a famous marble relief from the 2nd century, often called the pseudo-athlete monument. It depicts a young boy, clearly from a wealthy family, holding a perfectly detailed miniature sword and shield. He is not shown in the midst of play, but standing formally, his expression serious, as if these objects are already symbols of the gravitas and responsibility he is expected to assume. This image tells us that the act of playing with weapons was viewed with immense seriousness. It was the first step on the cursus honorum, the sequential path of public offices that defined a Roman nobleman's life, which almost always began with military service. Our process of recreating these toys begins with studying these artistic depictions and the rare archaeological finds. For a common legionary's sword, we select a sturdy piece of oak or ash and use traditional carving tools to shape the distinct, short, double-edged blade and the iconic knobbed hilt. The goal is to achieve a weapon that feels balanced and purposeful in a child's hand, not just a blunt stick. For a shield or scutum, we steam and bend a thin sheet of wood into the classic curved rectangular shape, reinforcing it with a crossbar on the inside. The front is then painted in the manner of a real legionary's shield, perhaps with bold lightning bolts or wings flanking a central boss, which we craft from a dome of bronze or hardened leather. The true test, however, comes when we take these recreated toys out to a field for a mock battle. The difference between a roughly carved stick and a properly balanced wooden sword is immediately apparent. The well-made sword swings with a satisfying whoosh, allowing for controlled parries and thrusts. The curved shield locks with a partner's in a test of strength, its design allowing a child to instinctively understand how to form a protective wall with a friend. This playful combat was a fundamental form of physical education, building the muscle memory for footwork, the coordination for block and strike maneuvers, and the teamwork necessary for formation fighting. The laughter and shouts of "I got you" that inevitably accompany these games today would have echoed just the same through Roman courtyards, a sound of joyful preparation for a life where such skills could one day mean the difference between life and death. Through these wooden swords and shields, Roman boys learned the art of war through the universal language of play, forging their bodies and their spirits for the empire they were destined to defend. The presence of these wooden swords and shields in children's graves offers a particularly poignant and somber insight into their significance. It was not uncommon for a young boy to be buried with his most cherished toy weapon, placed beside him as a final companion and a symbol of the identity he held in life and would carry into the afterlife. This practice speaks to a profound emotional attachment, but also to a powerful cultural expectation. The toy was so deeply intertwined with the child's sense of self that it was considered an essential part of his journey, a marker of the Roman virtues he was in the process of learning. For the grieving parents, it was a heartbreaking farewell, but also a declaration to the gods and to the community that their son was, and always would be a Roman. This cultural conditioning began at a very young age, often initiated by the father himself. Historical sources and artistic depictions suggest that a Roman paterfamilias would frequently engage in mock combat with his son in the courtyard of their home. This was far more than casual play. It was a fundamental pedagogical tool, a father's first lesson in the arts of war and the codes of conduct that defined Roman manhood, or virtus. Through these controlled skirmishes, a boy learned not just how to parry a thrust or hold his shield in formation, but also the importance of discipline, courage, and resilience. He learned to stand his ground, to respect strength, and to understand that play could have a serious, purposeful underside. This early bonding over martial play cemented the father-son relationship around shared values and set the boy on the path to becoming a citizen soldier, the ideal of Roman masculinity. Our process of recreating these play fighting sessions reveals the sophisticated physical and social lessons embedded within them. Using our replicated wooden gladius and scutum, we staged simple drills based on known legionary training exercises. The first thing you notice is the immediate, instinctual understanding of defensive posture the curved shield encourages. A child would naturally learn to present a guarded front, peering over the rim just as a legionary would. The weighted wooden sword teaches controlled, stabbing motions rather than wild swinging, mimicking the efficient killing thrusts of the real gladius. The father, acting as both opponent and instructor, could easily demonstrate the importance of keeping a tight formation by having the boy lock shields with a sibling or friend, creating a miniature testudo or tortoise formation. This transforms a simple game into a powerful lesson in unity and mutual protection. The societal emphasis on this militaristic play is reflected in the sheer volume of these toys found by archaeologists. They are among the most common artifacts recovered from sites associated with Roman childhood, found everywhere from the damp soil of British military outposts to the sun-baked earth of North African towns. This widespread distribution confirms that the expectation of martial readiness was not confined to the elite. It was a core value permeating all levels of Roman society. The son of a legionary veteran might practice with a sword whittled by his father, while the son of a senator might have a bronze miniature, but the underlying message was identical. To be Roman was to be prepared to defend the empire. Engaging in this recreated play today, you feel the weight of that expectation. The laughter and shouts of a mock battle are soon accompanied by the realization of the serious cultural forces at work. You understand how a society so profoundly shaped by conquest and expansion would naturally weave those themes into the fabric of childhood, ensuring that each new generation was psychologically and physically prepared to uphold its legacy. The toy sword was a promise, an expectation, and a burden, all crafted from wood and placed into the small, eager hands of a child who is learning, through the purest form of play, what it truly meant to be a Roman man. Amidst the clatter of hoops and the strategic silence of board games, the soundscape of a Roman childhood would have been filled with music. Children had access to a delightful array of simple musical instruments, from high-pitched whistles and flutes to the steady beat of small drums, each one a gateway to creative expression and communal fun. These were not the polished instruments of a formal orchestra, but charming, often whimsical noisemakers, crafted from the most basic materials the natural world had to offer. A hollow reed, a lump of clay, a stretched piece of hide. In the hands of a Roman toymaker, these simple elements were transformed into vehicles for rhythm and melody. The most common of these was the simple whistle or fistula, often molded from baked clay. These were far from plain tubes. Many were sculpted into fanciful shapes, most notably birds. A child would blow into the tail of a tiny clay songbird, and the sound that emerged was a sharp, clear trill, bringing their miniature creature to life with its own voice. Other whistles took the form of animals like ducks or pigs, merging auditory play with a tactile, visual toy. For a more melodic experience, there were panpipes, known as fistulae panos, made by tying together a series of reeds of varying lengths with plant fiber or sinew. Blowing across the top of these pipes produced a scale of haunting, breathy notes, allowing a child to experiment with simple tunes. Percussion provided the heartbeat of their play. Small drums, similar to tambourines without the jingles, were made by stretching a thin piece of goat or sheep skin over a wooden hoop and securing it with tacks or glue. These could be beaten with the hand or a small stick to keep time for games or songs. Another popular instrument was the clapper, often made from two pieces of wood or bone, hinged together at one end. The clacking sound they produced when snapped together was perfect for adding a sharp, rhythmic accent to any musical invention. The purpose of these instruments extended beyond solitary amusement. They were catalysts for group play and participation in broader cultural rituals. A group of children could form an impromptu band, one beating a rhythm on a drum while others accompanied on panpipes and whistles, their combined efforts creating the soundtrack to their games. During religious festivals and family celebrations, it was common for children to participate in processions, and these simple instruments gave them a way to contribute to the joyous noise, shaking rattles or blowing whistles to honor the gods and ward off evil spirits alongside their parents. Recreating these musical toys is an exploration of ancient sound. We begin with a clay bird whistle, carefully sculpting the body to create an internal chamber and a precise mouthpiece. The placement of the finger holes, if there are any, is critical to producing a clear note. Firing the clay in a kiln hardens it and gives the whistle its permanent voice. The moment of truth is the first breath into the cooled clay. The resulting sound is startlingly bright and piercing, a cheerful noise that would have easily cut through the din of a bustling Roman street. Constructing a set of panpipes requires a keen ear. We harvest reeds of different thicknesses and lengths, patiently cutting and sanding them to specific dimensions to approximate a musical scale. Tying them together in order from longest to shortest, we test each note, shaving off a tiny bit more from a reed until its pitch is just right. The resulting instrument produces a soft, ethereal sound, a cascade of notes that feels both ancient and immediate. Playing a simple melody on these pipes connects us directly to that creative impulse, the universal human desire to organize sound into something beautiful and expressive. Hearing the music from these recreated instruments is like unlocking a forgotten channel of the past. The sharp tweet of a bird whistle, the hollow thump of a small drum, the breathy scale of the panpipes, these sounds form an auditory palette that is distinctly Roman in its simplicity and charm. They remind us that the drive to make music is a fundamental part of childhood, a primal form of communication and joy that requires no complex technology, only creativity, a sense of rhythm, and the desire to fill the air with sound. This focus on music and play underscores a broader Roman belief in the importance of a well-rounded education, one that balanced the physical rigor of martial games with the artistic and intellectual development fostered by the arts. Learning to keep a steady beat on a drum or to play a simple melody on a set of panpipes was not seen as a frivolous distraction. It was an early lesson in discipline, patience, and the mathematical patterns inherent in rhythm and harmony. These skills were considered fundamental to cultivating a refined mind, one capable of appreciating the finer aspects of Roman culture, from the complex meters of poetry to the precise choreography of religious rituals. A child blowing into a clay whistle was, in a small way, beginning to understand the ordered structure that Romans believed underpinned both society and the cosmos itself. The designs of these instruments frequently served as a child's first introduction to the rich tapestry of Roman mythology and symbolism. A clay rattle might be adorned with a sculpted face of the god Silenus, the jovial companion of Dionysus, connecting its sound to ideas of festivity and celebration. A bone flute could be delicately carved with grapevines, a motif associated with Bacchus, the god of wine and ecstatic release. Even the simple shape of a bird whistle was symbolic. The nightingale was linked to poetic inspiration, while the owl was a sacred animal of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. Through daily interaction with these decorated objects, children absorbed the iconography of their culture, learning to associate specific images with divine stories and attributes long before they could read the texts that detailed them. This connection to the divine was made explicit during community festivals and religious ceremonies, where children were not merely observers but active participants. During the noisy celebration of the Lupercalia or the procession of the great mother goddess Cybele, the air would have been filled with the high-pitched trill of children's whistles and the rhythmic pounding of their small drums. Their music contributed to the cacophony believed to drive away malevolent spirits and appease the gods, giving them a valued role in ensuring the community's spiritual well-being. This participation fostered a powerful sense of belonging, making each child feel like an integral thread in the social and religious fabric of their city, from the grandest metropolis to the smallest provincial town. Our efforts to recreate the sounds of these instruments reveal their unique auditory character, a soundscape entirely distinct from our own. The clay bird whistle produces a startlingly sharp, penetrating tweet, a sound that carries remarkably well outdoors. The panpipes, made from reeds of varying lengths, create a soft, breathy scale that is both haunting and gentle, perfect for a solitary child experimenting with melody. The small drum, with its hide stretched over a wooden frame, gives a deep, resonant thump rather than a sharp snap, a sound that you feel in your chest as much as hear with your ears. When these instruments are played together, they create a vibrant, rustic symphony that is joyful, slightly raucous, and utterly captivating. Hearing this music today is like opening a direct auditory window into the Roman world. It is not the polished sound of a concert hall, but the lively, improvisational noise of play and ceremony, a sound that is human, imperfect, and full of life. It reminds us that the simple act of making music is one of the most fundamental forms of human connection, a way to express joy, participate in community, and pass cultural values from one generation to the next. The melodies those Roman children played may be lost to time, but the instruments themselves still speak, their playful echoes reminding us that the desire to create and share music is a timeless thread in the human experience. Beyond the finely carved dolls and cast metal chariots, there existed an entire world of play that required no workshop or marketplace, only a child's imagination and the resources immediately at hand. For countless Roman children, especially those from families of modest means, the most cherished toys were not bought but built, crafted from the everyday materials that filled their environment. A simple stick found on the ground could be transformed into a trusty sword for defending the homestead from imaginary invaders. A handful of pebbles became a set of game pieces for a board scratched in the dirt. A scrap of cloth, carefully bundled and tied with a bit of string, could be cradled as a beloved doll, its features drawn on with a piece of charcoal. This realm of dye and improvised play was not a lesser substitute for real toys. It was a vibrant testament to universal childhood ingenuity, a creative spirit that flourished completely independent of social class or economic status. The materials for these creations were all around them, limited only by perception. Along the banks of the Tiber or any local stream, smooth, flat stones could be gathered for skipping across the water or used as counters in a game. Clay dug from the earth could be shaped into crude animals or small figures and left to harden in the sun. In the autumn, fallen nuts became perfect little balls for tossing games. A piece of charcoal from the hearth could turn a flat stone or a patch of hard, packed earth into a canvas for simple drawings or the grid for a game of la trunculi. Even something as mundane as a knotted rope could be the source of hours of entertainment, used for jumping or simple tug-of-war games. This resourcefulness was a practical necessity for many, but it also fostered a profound connection to the natural world and a deep understanding of how to manipulate it for both utility and joy. The process of recreating these improvised toys is a beautiful exercise in constraint-driven creativity. We deliberately limit ourselves to only those materials a Roman child might have easily gathered: sticks, stones, rags of rough linen, clay from the garden, and natural cordage like hemp or flax twine. The goal isn't to create a perfect replica, but to capture the spirit of the invention. We take a forked stick and, with some careful bending and tying, fashion a simple slingshot, using a small scrap of leather for the pouch. Its power is minimal, perfect for targeting a pile of leaves or a painted mark on a wall. But the satisfaction of building a functioning tool from scratch is immense. We bundle straw and scraps of cloth into a rough human form, using a darker piece of fabric to create hair and a tiny shard of pottery with a painted smile for a face. This makeshift doll lacks the articulated limbs of its terracotta cousin, but it is soft, lightweight, and perfect for cuddling, a comforting companion fashioned from nothing. We mix earth and water to form a thick mud, shaping it into a crude ball before leaving it to bake hard in the sun. The resulting sphere is lumpy and imperfect, but it has a satisfying weight and can be kicked or thrown with abandon, its durability a testament to the simple genius of its design. This hands-on exploration reveals a crucial truth about Roman childhood, and indeed childhood across history. The most elaborate toy in the world cannot compete with the power of a child's own imagination. A purchased ivory doll might be more beautiful, but a cloth doll woven by a parent's hands carries a unique emotional weight. A cast bronze chariot is a marvel of engineering, but a chariot built from a piece of bark and 4 wooden wheels carved by an older sibling represents a triumph of personal creation. The value of the toy was not in its cost or complexity, but in the story the child attached to it, the narrative of how it was made, who helped make it, and the adventures it would undertake. This imaginative investment transformed a simple object into a priceless artifact of a personal world. This spirit of improvisation also points toward the informal, social nature of much Roman play. Games often emerged spontaneously from the environment and the group of children present. A clear patch of ground became a racetrack for hoop rolling. A set of steps became an obstacle course. The rules for ball games or running games were likely fluid. adapted on the spot to the number of players and the space available. This flexibility encouraged negotiation, collaboration, and leadership skills as children organized their own fun without constant adult direction. The play was organic, evolving, and deeply social, strengthening community bonds among the youngest members of society. Ultimately, these homemade toys remind us that the core experience of play is timeless and transcends the objects themselves. The laughter that erupted from a game of tag in a Roman forum echoes in a modern schoolyard. The concentration required to carefully guide a homemade hoop down a dusty street is the same focus a child today applies to a video game. The joy of creation, of turning nothing into something, is a fundamental human impulse. While the artifacts in museums tell us what the Romans could make, exploring these improvised toys shows us who they were: resourceful, creative, and joyful people who understood that the best games aren't stored on a shelf, but built in the heart and mind, ready to be brought to life with whatever is close at hand. This resourcefulness wasn't just born from necessity. It was a profound education in sustainability long before the word held its modern meaning. Roman children learned to see potential in everything around them, understanding that objects had multiple lives and that waste was merely a lack of imagination. A broken pot wasn't trash. It was a source of sharp pottery shards that could be used as game pieces, or a smooth, curved fragment that became the perfect body for a toy boat. This mindset cultivated a deep respect for materials and an innate understanding of reuse, lessons that were seamlessly integrated into the fabric of their daily play rather than taught as separate principles. In an era without plastic, their play was inherently eco-conscious, rooted in a circular economy where everything from nutshells to old rags found a second purpose as a source of joy. The creative process of building these toys was, in itself, a powerful engine for developing critical cognitive skills. A child deciding how to lash sticks together to form a rudimentary frame for a kite was engaging in fundamental engineering. Determining the right consistency of mud to form a ball that wouldn't crumble when thrown was a practical lesson in material science. Negotiating the rules of a new game with a group of friends fostered advanced social skills like communication, compromise, and leadership. This form of open-ended, child-directed play strengthened neural pathways associated with problem-solving, adaptability, and innovative thinking. They weren't just playing. They were constantly experimenting, failing, and iterating, honing a flexible mindset that would serve them well in the unpredictable world of adulthood. When we attempt to recreate this experience today, stripping away modern tools and materials, the challenge is both humbling and illuminating. We might try to make a ball by wrapping rags tightly with cord, only to find it falls apart with the first kick. This failure forces us to think like a Roman child. How can I bind this more securely? Would a different type of knot work? Should I add a core of straw for structure? The solution emerges not from a manual, but from tactile experimentation and observation. Successfully creating a functioning toy from scratch delivers a unique and deeply satisfying sense of accomplishment, a feeling far more potent than the fleeting excitement of unwrapping a manufactured product. It's the pride of creation, the joy of having transformed raw, simple nothing into something functional through one's own ingenuity. This hands-on engagement offers a powerful perspective on modern play, particularly in an age saturated with technology and predefined entertainment. The elaborate, articulated dolls and cast metal chariots we've recreated are incredible artifacts, but they represent the peak of Roman toy production, the equivalent of today's high-end gadgets. For most children, play was far simpler, yet arguably richer in its demands on the imagination. A purchased toy chariot dictates its own narrative. It can only be a chariot. A stick, however, can be a sword, a horse, a royal scepter, or a measuring rod, its story limited only by the child's mind. This minimalist approach to play underscores a crucial truth. The most valuable toy is not the one that does the most, but the one that inspires the most. There's a profound lesson here for our own time. Surrounded by an abundance of brightly colored plastic and immersive digital screens, the simple, unadorned objects of the Roman world remind us that play is ultimately a state of mind. It is the human capacity to project narrative, purpose, and emotion onto the world. The technology changes, but the fundamental impulse does not. The laughter that erupted from a game of tag in a Roman forum is the same laughter that fills a playground today. The concentration required to guide a homemade hoop down a dusty street is the same focus a child applies to a video game. The value lies not in the object itself, but in the creativity it unlocks. Reconnecting with these ancient, improvised playthings allows us to rediscover that essential, timeless magic, reminding us that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with nothing more than a simple stick and a world of imagination. From the polished ivory of a senator's daughter's doll to the simple, sun-baked mud ball of a farmer's son, the toys of ancient Rome offer us a uniquely intimate window into a world both foreign and familiar. We've journeyed together from the first rattles that soothed a Roman infant to the wooden swords that prepared a boy for his future, from the clatter of knucklebones on a tavern floor to the imagined roar of the crowd for a child's miniature chariot. Each of these recreated objects is more than a mere replica. It is a key, unlocking a deeper understanding of how Roman children laughed, learned, and grew. What becomes strikingly clear is that play was never just a distraction from the serious business of growing up. It was the very mechanism through which Roman society passed on its core values. A doll was a lesson in womanhood, a tiny shield a primer on civic duty, and a game of la trunculi a training ground for strategic thinking. These objects were the tools children used to navigate and internalize the complex social, religious, and military structures that define their world. They learned the importance of family from their role-playing, the power of the gods from their ceremonial rattles, and the thrill of competition from their races and ball games. Play was the invisible curriculum of Roman childhood, a curriculum taught not in classrooms, but in courtyards and streets with toys as the textbooks. Recreating these artifacts has been a profound exercise in empathy. It's one thing to read about a turbo whip top in a historical text. It's another entirely to feel the satisfying thwack of leather on wood and the intense focus required to keep it spinning. Handling real sheep knucklebones, you appreciate the deceptively simple skill needed to play the game, and you can almost hear the laughter and groans of players 2 years ago. Forging a metal hoop and hearing it jingle as it rolls, or sewing a leather ball and feeling its weight in your palm. These tactile experiences dissolve the centuries. They remind us that the joy of mastering a skill, the thrill of a game, and the comfort of a cherished toy are universal human emotions, as true for a child in ancient Pompeii as it is for a child today. This exploration invites a fascinating reflection on our own world of play. In an age of digital immersion and manufactured entertainment, the Roman emphasis on imagination, resourcefulness, and physical engagement feels both ancient and refreshingly relevant. Their play was inherently social, often improvised, and deeply connected to the natural and social world around them. It asks us to consider what we teach our own children through the toys we give them and the games we encourage. So we leave you with this question to ponder. After this journey into the Roman nursery, which of these ancient treasures calls to you? Would you have been drawn to the strategic challenge of la trunculi, the skillful artistry of guiding a bronze hoop, or the imaginative storytelling unlocked by a simple cloth doll? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives. If you enjoyed unearthing these stories of childhood past, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more adventures that bring history to life. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep curiosity as your guide.